Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Armchair Booking Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Stunning Steve Barber. And if you notice on YouTube, I'm actually running solo tonight. Unfortunately, my awesome, wonderful co host, Waylon, is unable to record. He let me know earlier today he has a really, really bad ear infection. And he cannot hear out of his left ear, and he just basically feels like crud. And so we waited until basically about 5 minutes ago, and we decided, okay, he's not able to record, but it's also been over 2 weeks since we recorded, so we still need to get an episode out for our loyal listeners who thank you so much for listening to us and or watching us on YouTube as it may. We really appreciate it, and thank you for being patient while we have both been kind of going through some stuff lately, which prevented us from recording. In my case, my wife had foot surgery the day after the last time we recorded, and she has been laid up, and I have been doing whatever I can to take care of her. And so she's okay enough now to where I am able to record because I have been able to actually leave for I say short periods of time, even though this past Saturday I left for a few hours, but my son was also here with her, and I'll get into the reason why I left during the recording. But, so I have that going on. And Dwaylon, as we announced one of the last episodes that we recorded, Dwaylon's wife is also pregnant, and she's still in the first trimester. And so he was also doing what he can to help take care of her and also help take care of their business. And, so we're just a lot of things, that we've always said family comes first, and we stand by that. So, but we haven't been able to record, but we decided, okay, if we decided that if we couldn't record as a team today, I'll just go ahead and give it a shot solo, because I have also been recording my other podcast, the Cubicle Chat. I've been doing it solo, and I've been getting some positive feedback. And Dwaylon also understands because he has his podcast, The Intellectual Rockstar, which if you have never checked that out, go check it out. He does an awesome job at it. Although the same things that have been keeping us from recording this podcast have also been keeping him from recording that podcast. And I was finally able to record an episode of Cubicle Chat this past Friday, I believe. It was this past Friday or Saturday, and it was the first episode I had recorded of that in 2 weeks. Actually, maybe even been longer than 2 weeks for that one. But we're trying to get back in the swing of things. We do appreciate everybody's patience. And for those watching on YouTube, you already see the t-shirt that I'm wearing. I actually bought that this weekend. It is for a friend of the show. She's also been a guest on the show at least 3 times. That is Big Mama, who is a staple of the Northern Wrestling Federation. She really is, I'll say, she really is leading the women's revolution there. And I do realize Nikki Victory is the champ, but being the champion doesn't make you the leader. And Big Mama will always be the leader. But even though Nikki Victory is amazing in the ring, if you've never seen her, go check her out. You can probably find her on, I know she's been on AEW Dark when they used to have that. And she's actually wrestled some other indie shows here and there. But yeah, Nikki Victory is amazing. But I'm actually representing the Big Mama shirt. Do want to get into some news before I discuss everything that's happened over the past couple of weekends when it comes to wrestling and me. First bit of news, this actually came out a few days ago. Jade Cargill has had her last match in AEW because she has now signed with WWE. And I hope she really does well. Hopefully WWE figures out how to use her correctly, because unfortunately they've had a track record of not using, I say women wrestlers, not just women wrestlers, but for some reason it seems like a lot of women wrestlers, they don't know how to utilize them correctly. And that'd be a shame, Jade Cargill, because she is very talented. She's got the look. She's got the promo skills. I mean, she is somebody that you could actually hitch your wagon to and put the title on, and she would do really well with that. And her last match for AEW was actually the rematch to where she lost her title to was it Chris Statlander, and that last match was actually in Cincinnati, so it was part of the taping or recording for Rampage. Now that was on the 13th of September. Rampage came was shown on the 15th, so it was a recording for that. But I was actually there in the audience, so I actually was privileged to see Jade Cargill's last match in AEW, and it was still a really good match. And I mean, you kind of tell, I think everybody knew she was leaving by that point. The rumors were already going around, but she still put on a really good match. And she and Statlander, they actually hugged in the middle of the ring after it was over. So I mean, you knew there was a lot of mutual respect there. One of the things, and this is kind of an editorial opinionated comment about something. I don't know if who all knows, but Jade Cargill's husband is Brandon Phillips. Brandon Phillips, he's a former Major League Baseball player. He played for the Reds for a while, and he also played for other teams. But they've been married for however many years. They have a daughter together. But you didn't hear you didn't really hear that mentioned all the time with the commentary for AEW. They didn't say, "Oh, here's Jade Cargill, wife of Brandon Phillips. Oh, let's talk about Brandon Phillips a lot. Okay, let's show Brandon Phillips out in the audience." You know why? Because Jade's the focal point of the story. That's who we should be talking about. The reason I bring this up, and this is talking about football, totally different sport, totally different, I guess, entertainment, whatever you want to call it. All these headlines that I kept seeing on football over this past weekend and last weekend were all about Taylor Swift, because she is apparently dating, was it Travis Kelce for the Kansas City Chiefs? Okay, good for them. Not really what people are wanting to tune in to see. And if you're trying to get more of an audience, a more diverse audience, by trying to get all the Swifties to come watch football, it won't last very long. I'm just going to say that, but just like most people don't want to see, okay, so he's dating somebody famous. Okay. We saw this also a few years ago with Jessica Simpson and Tony Romo. It was a distraction. So let's just, hey, football, NFL, take a cue from this. Jade Cargill stands on her own. Travis Kelce stands on. They don't need to be just associated with somebody else. Now, Jade Cargill has left AEW, and now she's with WWE. On the flip side of that, just last night, we had the debut of Adam Copeland in AEW. Adam Copeland, of course, in WWE, he's known as Edge. And this was another one that everybody kind of saw coming anyway, because his contract ran out, was it a few months ago, a couple weeks ago in WWE. They had his last match, his farewell match on Raw, but his name was still listed on the WWE website. And then all of a sudden, a couple of days ago, it disappeared off the website. It was pulled. And last night, he did a run-in. Well, at the very end, he did a save. Sting was getting beat down by Christian Cage. And of course, Edge and Christian will always be associated with each other. They were best friends growing up. They both had dreams of becoming wrestlers. They both pushed each other to become wrestlers, and they did. And they were an extremely successful tag team. They've also both had a lot of success as singles. And so maybe say, arguably, Edge had a little bit better run as singles, but then again, Christian Cage, as he's called outside of WWE, he's had his own success, and he's done it in various companies, not just the one. But Christian Cage, Luchasaurus, and cannot remember the other guy's name, they were fairly giving Sting a beatdown. And Christian Cage had the chair. He had a steel chair. It looked like, he may have been wanting to do a concerto on Sting. And then all of a sudden, the video pops up on the screen, and I did not watch the pay-per-view, but I've seen this bit of it. You can actually find it on YouTube. Video came up on the screen. It just showed somebody in a car, and it actually showed something that said rated R, which is kind of a hint of who it was. Of course, Edge, Adam Copeland, the rated R superstar. And then the music hit. Well, actually, first it was You Think You Know Me. And as soon as you heard that, you knew who it was. And Adam Copeland, of course, came out when the music actually hit. Metalingus by Alter Bridge. Great song, by the way. Alter Bridge, really good band. I like them a lot. He came out, and of course, the crowd went nuts. And Christian Cage is just staring at him. And Edge came in, and he got a chair, and it looked like he may have been doing the other half of the concerto, but then he turned around and whacked the other dude in the back with a chair. So he saved Sting, and he chased the other ones out. Christian Cage took off out of the ring. But to me, this is kind of fitting because I think everybody, especially Edge and Christian, they wanted to see them do one last run together, either as opponents or as partners, before Edge retired again. Because he had to retire once for medical reasons. He was actually told he'd never wrestle again. 11 years later, he actually came back. It's a pretty heartwarming story, but his run has not been the greatest. I mean, it wasn't horrible. I mean, it's a lot better than most people's, but he's gotten injured again a couple times, and he never really rose up above, maybe upper mid-card status, in my opinion. But everybody wanted to see him and Christian finish up together. They started together. Christian actually inducted Edge into the Hall of Fame, WWE Hall of Fame. And so it only makes sense for them to get back together. And so now they are in some way, shape, or form. And I'm glad to see it. And speaking of other things going on this past weekend, okay, let me actually jump to the weekend prior. All right, if you're on YouTube, you can actually see the two belts that are behind me. One is the big gold, which was the old. It was when it first debuted, it was still the NWA World Title. Later on became the WCW World Title, and then just became the World Title. It's still referred to as the Big Gold. You used to see it still in WWE for a long time. But underneath that is the one that the Big Gold actually replaced. And this is the 10 pounds of gold, also known as the Big Gold Dome, because as you can see on the belt, it looks like a big dome on the very front of it. When I think about the NWA World Title, this is actually the belt that I think of. I managed to buy that belt at a fan fest a year and a half ago. And I immediately, while I was there, probably 10 minutes after I bought it, I was able to have former NWA World Champion Tommy Rich actually sign it. Ironically, his booth was right next to Ricky the Dragon Steamboat's, who was also a former NWA World Champion. However, Ricky Steamboat held the other belt, and I didn't have that belt yet. And that one, I don't actually know, because the backing of it doesn't look like it can be signed. But if it can, maybe I can get him to sign it sometime. But yeah, so I had Wildfire Tommy Rich sign that belt. And then 6 months ago, another fan fest, took the belt with me. And those of you who are longtime listeners, longtime watchers, you already know that 6 months ago at another totally different fan fest, same location, well, same town anyways, in Chillicothe, different actually physical location, because instead of high school, it's actually at the University of Ohio Chillicothe campus. But I had the Beast, Dan Severn. He signed it because he's another former NWA World Champion, and he held that belt. That's the thing. That's one of the things whenever you were having somebody sign a belt like that, especially an older belt like that, really the unspoken rule, unwritten rule, but makes sense, is the person signing it should have actually held that belt at some point in their career, which Dan Severn did. Now, the NWA obviously is not as big as what it was back in the golden age of wrestling, back in the 80s, because then there was a split, and Ted Turner, of course, bought Jim Crockett Promotions, and then there was another split. There's a lot of wrestling politics involved. The NWA kind of became a separate thing, and all of a sudden it was and just was not as good as and not as prominent as what it was before. And then Shane Douglas kind of did some damage. Shane Douglas actually held that belt. And if he was there, if I'd actually met him, I should have had him sign it too. Maybe. I'm still not sure what to think about that one. But back 2 months ago, I think I was able to get another signature on that same belt. And that was at the Northern Wrestling Federation Summer Sizzler. Now, if you know your history of the Northern Wrestling Federation, if you've listened to this show, and if you watch this show enough, you know that some of the distinguished alumni from the Northern Wrestling Federation, people who've actually been through their training school and Bone Crushers, and they were trained up by Roger Ruffin and then and a lot of the other trainers, but some of the ones who've actually gone on to do really, really well in wrestling include people like Carl Anderson. They include people like Jillian Hall, but in this particular case, I'm talking about the monster Abyss, former NWA world champion, and he also held that belt. So when they had the Summer Sizzler, I took the belt with me. Yes, I was one of those. I was in the audience. Actually, I didn't just have the belt constantly displayed. I had a backpack with me so I could carry it. But I had the belt with me, and Abyss actually signed it. So now there were 3 signatures. Well, last weekend, right about 10 minutes away from my house in the town of Williamsburg, Ohio, there's another company that's located in Cincinnati. Used to be called Ascend Pro Wrestling. Now they are called Spot Monkey Promotions. We've actually mentioned them on the show before, and they are, I want to say, rivals with the NWF, but there are some wrestlers who actually do shows for Spot Monkey that are from the NWF. So I'm guessing that it's kind of cooled down as far as any kind of tension. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe somebody can actually let me know what that's all about. Well, every year, right about this time, they actually do a collaboration with this high school, Williamsburg High School, which is in Williamsburg, Ohio, which is about 10 minutes away from where I live. So the Mount Orb shows for the NWF are 10 minutes one way. This show is 10 minutes the other way. Well, the main event for this one was the current NWA, National Wrestling Alliance World Champion, EC3, defending his title against a NWF like mainstay almost, but Lord Crew. And trying to get Lord Crew on the show, by the way. I had actually sent him an email, and I talked to him on that Saturday, and I was like, "Hey, I sent you an email." He's like, "You did?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, he looked and he said, "Oh man," he said, "You sure did, didn't you?" He said, "I am so sorry because," and if you know Lord Crew, he is a stand-up guy, but I'd love to have him on the show. Great dude, but he was actually challenging for the NWA World Title. Now, when I mentioned earlier about seeing Jade Cargill on the taping of Rampage, well, earlier, the same taping, and for those of you who actually watched the Rampage, you've seen Lord Crew. And he came out, and of course, everybody there in the audience was all just yelling, including me, Crew, Crew, because, we know him. And there was a lot of NWF personnel there. And of course, they were just going nuts, just seeing him in there in the AEW ring. And then he got squashed. It was a tag team match, but he and his partner got squashed. I didn't like it, even though when I talked to Crew about it, he even said, "Look, the paychecks cash the same." Okay, that's his outlook on it. He has a positive outlook about it. But he went from that to a week and a half later, he's challenging the NWA World Champion for that prestigious belt. And I was talking with him before, and his mom was actually there as well. But he was telling me how he'd been talking to his mom about it, and just telling her how much of a big deal this was because of the history of that particular championship. And it's true. And I was happy for him to be able to have this opportunity to actually challenge for that belt. I mean, it doesn't matter. People go, oh well, it's fake. No, it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's predetermined or not. The fact that he was being put in the main event, they actually thought of him highly enough to say, hey, we're going to make you a contender for the most prestige, or it used to be the most prestigious title, the one with the most history in all of professional wrestling. I mean, that's a huge deal. But EC3 actually signed this belt as well. Had my picture taken with him and my good friend Randy, also known as Rescue Randy. He was there with me as well. And so we had our picture taken with EC3. I have posted the picture on social media. The first picture, though, I did not post because I looked down and EC3 was actually holding the NWA, the actual title they're using, the actual belt. He was holding it upside down and he didn't realize it. And so I was like, hey, dude, the belt's upside down. He was looking at me, he's kind of laughing, like, whoops. But he seemed like he was a pretty good dude, by the way, EC3. I didn't know a lot about him. I still really don't know a ton about him, but I could tell he's good. He is very good. And part of the action that actually happened in that match, before that even started, Crew was introduced first, and of course he came out, and then he was attacked by somebody who he's feuding with in that organization. They attacked him, hurt his leg. And then, of course, EC3 came out. Then he asked Crew, do you want to keep going? He said, you can give up. There's no shame in it. And Crew, if you know Crew, he's not going to give up anyway. They had the match, and EC3 didn't end up winning. And, but then the same guys, and I really wish I could remember who it was, because it was this guy and his manager who actually attacked Crew. EC3 jumped back in the ring and he chased him off. But he did tell Crew, he's like, you were down. He said, you only have one good leg, and you took the NWA World Champion to the absolute limit on one leg. He's like, you were definitely going to get a rematch. And he said, because, I mean, you earned it. And just to see that, and just, I mean, I'll say I'm friends with Crew, because, I mean, we actually we're on like personal, not just his Lord Crew page, but his actual personal Facebook page. We're friends on Facebook, and every time I see him, he always shakes my hand. Hey, good to see you. Asks me how I'm doing, and he's actually asked me about how the podcast is going, and then we talk music sometimes because Crew's a metalhead, and we talk about different concerts and things like that. So I mean, but he was a good dude, and I was very glad to see him in that match, despite the outcome not being what I would have preferred. But I mean, I get it. I mean, but yeah, definitely keep your eye on Lord Crew in the future, because he's been on AEW Dark tapings, and now of course he's been on AEW Rampage, and he's done some other stuff. He's traveled all over the country to wrestle, and he just a good dude all around for a lot of reasons. But that was last weekend. This past weekend, and when I say this past weekend, I mean literally 2 days ago, I went to another fan fest up in Chillicothe. Once again, ran by Bobby Fulton, and always puts on a good event. I've been to 4 of them now. I've only stayed for the wrestling for one of them, and that was the first one. And it's not that I don't want to see the wrestling, but it's also an hour and a half away. The other, the last 2 times I went, I had my son with me, and he really didn't want to stay to watch the wrestling. It also makes it for pretty late night by the time we get home. And this time I didn't stay for the wrestling because, as I mentioned, my wife had foot surgery. She's still kind of laid up, and yes, he was helping her some, but at the same time, I didn't want to stay there. I didn't want to have to put that on him. Being all of 12 years old, at least for another couple of days. He'll be 13 here, shortly in a few days. I didn't want to have to put that on him to take care of her. And if something happened, to her, if she fell, um, while she was trying to get, use her knee scooter to get around the house, get to the bathroom, I didn't want to put that on him. So I decided not to stay for the wrestling. I also decided not to go to Covington to watch the NWF show that they had going on down there Saturday night. Of course, here's the kind of the wild thing about that. At the fan fest that was going on in Chillicothe, so the people who had their booths set up were, of course, Big Mama, because she actually had a match there. She's had a match at every single one of the fan fests that they've had. Yeah, and she's actually the big time championship wrestling women's champion. And I don't know if that's the official title of it, but I mean, she is their champion. And so she was there. She was going to be wrestling, so she wasn't going to be in Covington either. But another friend of the show, repeat guest, Wildcat Chris Harris, was also there. But he actually told me he was going to try to book it back down to Covington. And when I say, I mean, it's a little bit of a haul to get from Chillicothe, Ohio to Covington, Kentucky. I mean, you're talking at least a 2-hour drive, at least. And, so, well, maybe not that far, but either way, I mean, it's a little bit of a haul to get there. I don't know if he made it or not. But I did, he asked me if I was going to go, and I told him I said, I can. I said, I got to make sure my wife is taken care of. And I mean, and he got it. I mean, because Chris Harris, the person, I mean, is actually just a super good dude. I've become friends with him and his wife, Shannon. She's awesome. And I'm glad to see them. But the fan fest itself, I actually didn't, I wasn't planning on staying a real long time. And I did end up staying a little bit longer than what I was expecting. But it was, once again, a really cool experience with meeting some of the wrestlers who I did meet. And being able to just sit and just talk with them, when I could, because sometimes, I mean, it's, if you have a long line, you can't monopolize somebody's time. If they have a long line of other people who are also there waiting to get an autograph or waiting to get a picture or something of that nature. But one of the things that I was able to get, because I was kind of looking at merchandise they had there, I was looking at maybe, I was hoping that they had they have not had any good belts there since the first one I went to. And that one actually had a couple more belts I really wish I'd have gotten, but I mean, they're not exactly cheap. And so, but they haven't had any of the belts that I've been wanting, the last 3. But one of the things, and I pointed out, it's right there, for those watching on YouTube. If you look, it's a Funko Pop, and this one has the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase and IRS Mike Rotunda, and of course they were known as Money Incorporated. I bought that from them, and they autographed it. And Mike Rotunda actually, he wrote Leighton and Steve, and now granted, he misspelled Leighton, but it's no big deal. I mean, it's not the first time this happened. But that was really cool. We got to meet them. Didn't really talk to them a real long time because they actually had a little bit of a line of people, because I mean they're both pretty famous, and people still know who the $1 Million Man is. I did pass along my condolences to Mike Rotunda. I did it kind of quietly. I didn't say, hey, but I did it real quietly, and he told me thank you. And I think that was a case that if Mike Rotunda had decided he wasn't going to go, I don't think anybody would have faulted him. Because for those who don't know, of course, Mike Rotunda is the father of Wyndham Rotunda, also known as Bray Wyatt, who passed away about a month ago. Just unexpectedly. And, You can also see I have a couple Bray Wyatt figures back there as well. And for Microton to show up, I mean, and maybe this is a way for him to get his mind off of. But like I said, I mean, I just told him really, really quietly. I didn't want to make a spectacle of it because that's just not something that you just you're not loud when you do things like that. I didn't want to draw attention to it. But some of the other ones that I met, I of course met Tito Santana, and yeah, meet Tito was kind of cool. But then he actually, one of the funny things was he asked me, "Hey, do you follow me on Facebook or anything like that?" I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "You and I are friends on Facebook," which we are. And this is like his real name. His real name is Merced Solis. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "We've been friends on Facebook for a few months." He's like, "All right, cool." And I did talk to him about coming on the podcast. Sorry, Tito, I can't afford it. And if anybody wants to know, Tito charges a little bit for podcast appearances. So probably have to pass on him. But even before Money Inc., one of the wrestlers who I've been wanting to meet for ever since I was a kid, and finally got a chance to meet him because he actually really doesn't travel a lot. But as soon as I say who it is, I mean you'll understand why if you know your wrestling history. But that's Terry Allen, also known as Magnum TA. And of course, Magnum was in a really bad car wreck back in 1986, and doctors actually told him then he'd never walk again. Which he did ended up walking again because I mean he was in such great physical shape. That's actually probably the reason why he wasn't worse off than what he was. But he never did wrestle again. And even there at this event, you could see the big brace on his leg, and he had trouble with his right arm because whenever he would, reach out the hand for a handshake, he would always shake with his left hand, which of course, normally you don't shake with your left hand, but for him, he really couldn't move his right arm. Now, Tully Blanchard was supposed to be sitting beside him at the time. Tully wasn't there yet. I've actually met him before, Tully Blanchard. And he's actually a nice guy. So I kind of wish I would have waited to kind of meet both of them together. Because if you know the history of those two, I mean, they had one of the greatest cage matches of all time. They had the greatest I Quit match of all time. Even though Tully never said I quit, go look it up. He never said I quit. Magnum and I talked about that for a little bit, but Magnum, he seemed to be a pretty cool guy. He told me to hit him up for a possible podcast appearance. So we'll have to see how that goes. He didn't list any rates or anything like that, but we'll have to see how it goes. I'd love to have him on the show. But some of the other ones, met Greg the Hammer Valentine. He had the Intercontinental title with him, and I was able to take my picture holding the title with him. The living legend, Larry Zbyszko. Larry Zbyszko, man, he's a very friendly guy. He's a talker. I'll tell you right now, that man, he is definitely a talker. I talked to him about coming on the podcast, and he told me his rate, and so his is a lot more doable. I'll just put it like that. Met Axis Smash from Demolition, also known as the Masked Superstar, and Crusher Khrushchev, or Bill Eadie is the Masked Superstar, or Axe, his real name. Barry Darso is Smash's real name. But met them, and they actually had kind of their reaction when I asked them about doing podcast appearances actually kind of caught me off guard. I said, "Hey, do you podcast? Do you do podcast appearances?" And Bill Eadie actually said, "We don't, on the advice of our lawyer." And that caught me off guard. And they said they had experiences where people were attributing things being said that they didn't say. And I didn't get the details, but it sounds like a case of maybe some shady editing on a podcast that they appeared on before. and I don't want to speculate too much. So, but I mean, it was also really cool meeting them. And uh, next team that I met was Faces of Fear, Haku or Ming or King Tonga, and the Barbarian. And if you follow me on Facebook, my personal page on Facebook, which I I will probably have had this picture put on the armchair booking page as well on Facebook, because I definitely had it put on the Twitter page, at Booking Armchair. The picture what I took with them, it has Ming. He is choking me out. Now, he actually did that to everybody. We were taking the picture, but for some reason, I guess people decided they want Ming choking them out. And once again, if you know anything, if you keep up with wrestling at all, Ming, Haku, whatever you want to call him, King Tonga, is considered to be the toughest, like legitimately tough people in wrestling. As in, not inside the ring. We're talking like outside the ring, like real fights. The stories of him are legendary, where he's pulled people's teeth out of their mouth, just reached up and just grabbed and pulled, where he snapped handcuffs from cops where they, arrested him because somebody would start, he wouldn't start the fights, somebody else was starting to fight with him. And then one of the things that would set him off is, you get up in his face and say, hey, I think what you do is fake. He doesn't take too kindly to that because this is how he feeds his family. And now you're insulting him. But there's other stories. He almost pulled wrestler Jesse Barr. He almost pulled his eye out for real. And this was because, Jesse Barr had thrown some guy in a ditch, and Ming didn't take too kindly to that. And Jesse Barr got in his face. And so Ming almost pulled his eyeball out. There's cases where he bit a guy's nose, but yeah, he's just legitimately tough. But the little bit I got to talk to him seemed like a real nice guy. I actually talked to Barbarian for a few minutes because Ming was signing some autographs for whoever was in front of me, but I was sitting there just talking to the Barbarian, and I was telling him about how I remembered the first time I ever saw him was in Mid-Atlantic. It was on a Mid-Atlantic taping, and he interfered. This is on TV. He interfered in a match where the masked assassin was battling an enhancement guy, a jobber guy. And the Barbarian, nobody knew who he was. All of a sudden, he came in the ring and attacked the assassin, and he did some flying headbutts. And I just remember back then, he kind of resembled Road Warrior Animal, but you could tell it wasn't Animal, because they kind of had the same haircut. But the Barbarian, he was actually telling me, he's like, oh, he's like, brother, I was so nervous before that. I was so nervous, having to do this, and then working with all these guys, and because he ended up being part of Paul Jones' army. I think before Paul Jones even calling his army, but he was, of course, aligned with Paul Jones as his manager. And at the time, of course, I was a big Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant fan, and he had this long 5-year feud with Paul Jones. So if there's somebody associated with Paul Jones, automatically I hated him. I told him that, and he laughed. He's like, "Yep," and it just seemed like a super cool chill dude. That also somebody else that you really don't want to mess with in person. But that was just really a cool thing to meet them. And then when Ming looked at my shirt, of course, I was wearing the Armchair Booking t-shirt, gotta promote the brand. He's like, what is this Armchair Booking? I said, it's my podcast. He's like, everybody's got a podcast now. And, but yeah, they won't come on the podcast. They don't do podcast appearances. Met Rikishi. His was actually a pretty good deal because for the money that you paid for him, and they also took card. It wasn't just cash. A lot of the fan fests, unfortunately, they take cash. They will not take card. But Rikishi actually took card. But for the price, you got the picture that's taken with him. You got an autograph picture, and you got a T-shirt, a free T-shirt that I might wear that the next one because they didn't have any 3Xs. They did have some 2Xs, but it has, of course, the Usos on it. Pop that a camera for a second. For those of you who are watching on video, that's the shirt right there. Um, as you can tell, I mean, it has Rikishi. It has both the Usos. It has Solo Sikoa, and it has Roman Reigns. And at the bottom, it says Tribal War. And on the back of it, it just has like holding up the finger that says we them one, we the ones. But that was actually really cool. Great bargain for that. I met Jimmy Garvin and Ronnie Garvin, former NBA world champion Ronnie Garvin. And that was the thing. If anybody actually there would have signed the big gold belt, Ronnie Garvin would have been it, because he's also a former NWA world champion. That's the belt he held, was the big gold, not the 10 pounds of gold. But they actually don't do podcasts, which is a shame, because I mean, I think both those guys, would have a lot of good stories to tell. But some of the other ones who were there that I did not meet, because I mean, you really are limited. Of course, the big star of the show was Bret Hart. He had a line that was just literally wrapped around the balcony of the gymnasium we were at. And he was actually sitting in the same place where Sting was sitting 6 months ago. But they're the main ones. And I'm also thinking, man, I'm in the wrong career field if all I have to do is just sit there and sign autographs, have a picture taken with people, and charge at a minimum $140 a person. And there was at least 200 people there. Do the math. That dude just made some pretty good money for what he was doing. But Bret Hart was there. Of course, Tommy Wildfire Rich was also there. Him and Austin Idol. The Godfather, or the Good Father, or Papa Shango, or my personal favorite, Soul Taker. He was Charles Wright. He was there along with Mark Henry. They actually were sitting together. The Boogeyman was there. Harry Smith, who is British Bulldog. Davey Boy Smith is his son. Vampiro was there. There was some other ones. I'm just trying to remember everybody, because I mean, I just didn't have the money to actually kind of meet everybody. Because I will say this: the cost of getting autographs and pictures has gone up. In fact, I want to say inflation must have really hit that, because every price seemed to be about 50% higher than what it was the last time. But yeah, still a really good time. If you ever get a chance to go to one of the fan fests, especially that particular one in Chillicothe, because Bobby Fulton, Jimmy Hines, that's his real name, he puts it on twice a year. And he does it. They raise money for local charities, for an auction house where they which also pumps money into other charities. It's a really fun time, and especially if you like some of the old school wrestlers, if you like meeting them. Because I can just tell you, some of the ones that I've met, the 4 times that I've gone, which include Ricky Steamboat, include Barry Windham, who actually was not there this past weekend. He was scheduled to be there. I didn't see him. So if he came there, it was after I left. But J.J. Dillon, and you see some of the other ones. Nikita Koloff. That one was one that just still blows my mind. One of the coolest experiences I've ever had. Bill Apter is another one. Kevin Sullivan, Sam Houston, Baby Doll. Mention Sam Houston, you got to mention his ex-wife, Nicola Roberts, also known as Baby Doll. But then his brother, Jake the Snake Roberts, met him. Just it's so much fun going to one of those. And if you're a wrestling fan, I definitely recommend it. And you see all the other people, all these other wrestling fans, and you say, yeah, cool, we're this one kind of a big happy family. But one of the things that also was going on Saturday night, and I actually totally forgot it was going on, but I've actually heard about some of the results, was the NXT Premium Live event, formerly known as a pay-per-view, but it was No Mercy. And I've already seen some of the results, and just seeing the lineup, to be honest with you, I mean, the lineup alone looks like, man, this is going to be a really, really stacked card. And just to talk about some of the matches that were I'm at to find um the matches that happened. Um, we're talking like Dominic Mysterio, of course, was defending the North American title, and he ended up losing it to Trick Williams. I'm not familiar with Trick Williams, but you know what? I mean, he must be highly thought of because I mean he's already holding the title, and Dominic Mysterio, he's actually got to the point he doesn't necessarily need that title right now, um, because it's an NXT title and he's part of um, Judgment Day, where I mean they're holding like the main roster titles, and so I kind of got, yeah, he held a title. They want to have all the titles, but at the same time, it would make more sense to hold the main roster titles. Baron Corbin and Braun Breaker had a match. I would have loved to seen that one. And I can still go back and watch it, obviously, on Peacock. And you just had some other ones. Becky Lynch over Tiffany Stratton because Becky Lynch is the NXT Women's Champion right now, and which honestly I don't get that. Becky Lynch should be doing stuff main roster, not the developmental brand. You're doing it to get ratings, all right, whatever. But I will have to go back and watch that one. And the next WWE pay-per-view, of course, is Fastlane. That one's coming up next weekend. That one's also looking like it's going to be a very, very stacked card. It's going to be good. I think part of this is due to the management changes that have happened within WWE over the past few weeks. All the news coming out of there, which, by the way, I'd be remiss not to mention all the releases that happened in WWE right after all the management changes happened, which we knew as fans, the internet wrestling community, the IWC would know it was to be expected. Some of the names weren't a surprise, but there were some names that caught everybody off guard, especially like Dolph Ziggler. I can see Dolph Ziggler going to AEW because his brother's already there to begin with, so it makes sense to kind of put them together. Elias, which if you've been keeping up with Elias's personal page, Elias has apparently became a born again Christian, so he's putting his focus on other things. It looks like besides wrestling, and so just from a personal standpoint, because I mean I've talked about before. I mean I'm also a Christian, and so I'm happy for him as well. But he's looks like he's doing maybe something other than wrestling. I don't know. Maybe definitely have a character change. We'll have to see. But Mustafa Ali, that shouldn't have been that much of a surprise because he had tried to leave WWE in the past couple of years, but they would not let him out of his contract. But now it was a little bit of shock because he was supposed to have a match. In fact, he was supposed to be going against Dominic Mysterio for the North American title at No Mercy. Then all of a sudden, the last minute, they had to change it. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of other names on there. Dana Brooks won. I mean, I know she hadn't been utilized a lot, but at the same time, Dana Brooks to me is very talented, and I hope she can land somewhere. And just to show, I mean, how good she is, and she's been through, she's been through the ringer, but she's had a lot of tragedy happen in her personal life, and and I hope she can really find somewhere where she can stand out because she is really good, I think. But one of the things, though, that also happened Saturday night, I mentioned it before, was the Northern Wrestling Federation had their a show down in Covington at Hits. You've heard us talk about it before. That's actually one of their main places. It's where they have like their big events, like their Summer Sizzler, where they had the Women's Revolution. The second annual Women's Revolution was also at this place because I mean, it's a big venue, for an indie wrestling, but it's a big place. You could fit a lot of people in there, and I was not able to make it. Apologize, but apparently one of the things I missed was a gentleman who was just on the show. It was actually to promote Summer Sizzler, and that was Star Rider. Star Rider turned heel. I kind of had a feeling it was going to happen because he was going against, I think it was Rex. And, when you have two faces for no reason having a match, more than likely one of them's going to turn heel. And so I kind of wondered, especially since Adam Swayze just turned face and rejoined Rex. So they're part of the Hollywood Blondes or Box Office Blondes, which, by the way, I actually bought one of their shirts at the event in Williamsburg. And finally, but Adam Swayze just turned face, and so it wouldn't make any sense for them to turn heel also because they're also the tag team champions again for the NWF. And so I was like, I was like, okay, maybe they're turning Star. Yeah, sure enough, they turned him heel. But part of that, in a way, kind of makes sense because Star Rider also wrestles for Ohio Valley Wrestling, OVW, down in Louisville. And apparently he actually is a heel there already. And so for him to turn heel in Cincinnati, which is only 2 hours away from Louisville, that way he can kind of maintain that continuity. I mean, it just kind of makes sense. And to be honest with you, for a lot of wrestlers, switching from one side to the other, as long as you don't do it too often, Big Show, and that's not his fault. He's just doing what he was told. But as long as somebody doesn't switch too often, a switch from heel to face to heel, can be kind of a shot in the arm. All of a sudden, because you're going to get that attention. Oh my God, you were, everybody loved you. You were a good guy. Now you're a bad guy. What's going on? And so you may get a little bit of a career boost. And plus, I mean, it also, I would say, helps with the experience. No one had to wrestle as a face. No one had to wrestle as a heel, because if you look at the vast majority of the legendary wrestlers, they usually at some point had worked both sides of the fence. The only ones I can think of off the top of my head who only worked face, and I'm pretty sure there were other ones, but Ricky the Dragon Steamboat was a face his entire career. Tito Santana, as far as I know, was a face his entire career. And they both obviously did extremely well. But people say, well, what about this? Dusty Rhodes started as a heel. Then he became a face, a very popular face. And then Dusty Rhodes actually turned heel again, joined the NWO. It didn't make any sense. But that's another story. Ric Flair, depending on what territory he's in, he was, that told, he was a heel almost everywhere except for the Carolinas. Carolinas, he was a face until, of course, they broke Dusty's ankle and he joined, and they formed the Horsemen and all that. But I'm pretty sure somebody, please email me, armchairbookingpodcast@gmail.com, and let me know of any other ones, especially ones who stayed heel. I'm pretty sure, there was somebody, but everybody I could think of, at some point, they had people cheering them because of the other heel they may have been going against in a particular match. Because thinking Abdul the Butcher, no, Abby, I mean, he actually was kind of a face, just depending on who he was going against. Bruiser Brody, same way. Kamala, maybe Kamala was a heel everywhere. I don't know. Somebody email me, hit me up, let me know. But one of the things about Star Rider, and the reason I bring him up, because him wrestling in OVW, as well as the NWF, the OVW is the featured organization on a show on Netflix. It was actually filmed last year, almost a year ago exactly, because they actually run through the dates on the show. The show has 7 episodes, but it's called Wrestlers. And it actually follows the OVW and some of the things they're going through. They're trying to help bring the company back up because the company was actually in danger of shutting down. and then they were purchased by a man named Matt Jones. He's big in like Kentucky sports broadcasting, and he's um got enough money that he was able to, him and a partner actually purchased OVW, but of course now he's part of OVW, so now he's there. But they were showing like actual meetings, not just, okay, I'm gonna go talk with her. No, it was actually like business meetings with them. And this was an actual true documentary. And they show Al Snow. If you remember WWE back, during the Attitude Era, Al Snow was really big then. And then he was also one of the head trainers on the show Tough Enough. But Al Snow, he's been running OVW now for a few years. And, they show him quite a bit. But the show itself has now brought a lot of visibility to OVW, and it's become very, very popular, especially amongst wrestling fans. Because then I also found out, because I'd had you can actually watch OVW every Thursday, 7 o'clock Eastern time on the Fight TV app. I've had the Fight TV app on my phone for probably a year. I had no idea you could do that. I found that out, and so I actually started watching OVW. But yeah, definitely check that out. I mean, it's a fantastic show, and it's a documentary, and it pulls no punches. You see like dynamics with family, the mother and daughter who are both wrestlers, and but they didn't always have the best relationship growing up, and that's a shoot. I mean, that's not something that was a storyline. No, I mean, this has actually brought them a little closer, and you see some of the problems that some of them have had with drugs, and you see, other ones like just relationship, like real relationship issues. And then you see the struggles for the promoters and everybody where they're trying to get more eyes on product, and they're trying to get more people to watch, because it only helps them, because I mean, it's still a business. And so they're trying to grow the business, um and it's just a really super good show. Go check it out. You'll like it, especially if you're a wrestling fan. You'll really like it. And actually, I just want to give another shout out to my boys over at the Dad World Order podcast. They actually had Al Snow on their show last week, or actually this past weekend, and that was actually really cool to see that, because I'm friends with those guys, and I'm really happy that they were able to get Al Snow on there. And Mike, Magnificent Mike, he actually told me, how hard it was to get them. I mean, so it's not just something that anybody could just call Al Snow and say, hey, can you come on my podcast? I mean, no, there's Mike actually happens to know somebody, and and you have to build that trust issue, and they knew they were not just a fly by night thing. Or the way Larry Zabesco, when I talked to him about being on the podcast, and he was laughing, he could tell, thankfully, that I wasn't like what he was describing. He said so many, he said, oh, I get to do a podcast, and it's just some teenage boy living in his parents' basement. And I was laughing. I was like, no, I said, this is definitely not the podcast like that. I said, not like that, but hopefully we can get Larry Zabesco on here soon. I mean, I don't know what the timeline would be, but but we're in talks. I'll just leave it at that, because he gave me his email address. He told me to email him, so I will have to do that. But along with Wrestlers, the show Wrestlers, which is on Netflix, that was a documentary. It's a true to life documentary. But the other show, which is about wrestling, which was not a documentary, it was an actual, episodic show. Well, I say episodic, they only had 2 seasons and 8 episodes per season. And it's a show Heels, which was on Stars. It just had its last episode for this season a couple weeks ago. Then a week later, we got the notification that Heels has been canceled. It was supposed to have a season, a 3rd season and beyond, but no, it's been canceled. And a lot of us who were fans of the show, or wrestling fans, are wondering why. Why was it canceled? I mean, were they not getting ratings? Because that show, I mean, if it's ended, if it's really done, because I have read where the producers of the show, basically the creators of the show, they are in talks with other networks trying to get the show back on there, which not would not be the first time a show's ever done that. Because think about the show Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai started out on YouTube Red, remember that, and nobody watched it because nobody had YouTube Red. But they moved it to Netflix, and it became the hottest thing since Sunburn. Hopefully, the same thing can happen with Heels. That because the show, if it's done, it ended on an extreme cliffhanger, and I'm not going to spoil it, but I mean, you'd have to definitely go watch it. The second season did a really good job of expanding on a lot of the things happening in the first season, which the first season did leave a lot of questions. Okay, why is this going? I mean, like good questions, make you want to, that would make you want to watch the show again. And when now all of a sudden it's on a huge cliffhanger. Well, it's actually on a few cliffhangers. And so I'm going, okay, I can't wait for the next season. And then they come in, oh no, sorry, it's canceled. Oh, thanks. But along with the DWO, by the way, I want to give some other shout outs. Um, give a shout out to Ted, the Hillbilly Hill. Ted actually appeared on my cubicle chat show, and we were discussing just villains in movies, villains in TV shows, villains in comics, just because that's what Ted, he specializes in heels because people don't want to talk about heels, but Ted is a very good analyst when it comes to wrestling, and just a very good analyst period when it just comes to characters and just life in general. And we had a excellent discussion about that. Um, my boy BC Hunter with Wrestling with the Truth, Wrestling with the War, Wrestling with the 80s. He does an awesome job on this shows, both audio and on YouTube. Um, definitely go check him out. And BC also has his Facebook group, which he posts a lot in there, a lot of good questions. And if you're a fan of the old school stuff like I am, and you'll definitely enjoy it. And want to definitely give a good shout out to Finisher Wrestling, because while my wife has been convalescing with her foot surgery, and me trying to do a lot of the things that around the house where it's only me doing it, where she's not able to help out at all, when normally she does. I had the guys from Finisher Wrestling actually reach out and ask me how I'm doing, and just checking in on me. I mean, that's something I really do appreciate. So I want to give those guys a big shout out and big thank you for that. Go check out their show. Definitely. Another. You're talking about some great wrestling analytical minds, and they have a really good way of looking at things. And they've had myself and Dwaylen have been on their show a couple times, and they've been on our show, and it's always great talking with those guys. So go check them out. Some other non-wrestling shout outs, of course. Always got to give a shout out to True Crime Cast / Bless Their Hearts. Jamie and John still doing an excellent job, and they actually have other projects going on as well that they're kind of expanding on. And they're doing all that through Stoveleg Media, which is ran by Nate Metz. Nate Metz is another person who was on the Cubicle Chat not that long ago. Just a great dude, and one of the most interesting people I think I've ever actually had on a show or ever talked to. I have not actually met him in person, but I have had him on the show, and actually wrote a story for his Mysteries of the Ohio Valley podcast. But he actually told me about this next one that I'll give a shout out to, the Nerdcast Empire. If you are into wrestling, which I'm assuming that if you're listening to this podcast, that you probably are into wrestling. If you're into music, metal, heavy metal, hair bands, you would also like their show too, because they also just talk about music. If you like anime, which I'll be honest with you, I don't know a ton about anime. I don't dislike it, but I've just never really gotten into it. But these guys, I mean, they talk a lot about anime, and even with the discussions, even if their podcast, like I said, it's called the Nerdcast Empire. I've listened to the majority of their episodes. I think I missed the first couple ones. I will have to go back and listen to their first debuts, but um even about subjects that I don't know a lot about, I'm still able to keep up with it, sort of, because they keep the conversations interesting. And on their last episode, they actually had listener questions, and I had actually sent a question, and they actually read it. And so, thanks, guys. I really appreciate that. And you know, yeah, definitely go check out the Nerdcast Empire, and also go check out the Mixtape Podcast. A bunch of other great guys. They actually had me on an episode where we were talking about 1980s heavy metal a few months ago. Had a great time recording with them, and hopefully we can collaborate again. Some in the future. We have talked about it. It's just a matter of getting everybody's schedules to line up. But hopefully soon. But we'll see. But really, that is all I have right now. Like I said, Dwaylen unfortunately couldn't make it because his when he told me he couldn't hear out of one of his ears at all, he was just totally deaf. I'm like, well, he's only going to hear half the story anyway. So, and he's just really, really he just wasn't up to recording tonight. But I told him, I said, I'm going to go ahead and go solo since it's been a while since we recorded, and we do know out of sight, out of mind, and people forget about you. And right now, since the show has been demonetized, I'm not going to go into that, but we're also looking for sponsors. So if you know anybody who would like to sponsor a podcast, or if you would like to sponsor a podcast, please have them reach out to the show at armchairbookingpodcast@gmail.com. Last but not least, give another shout out to my friend Justin at the TNC Sports Talk. He's also stepped in and helped me out, and he's always checking on me and my wife and my family to make sure we're doing okay, because going through kind of hard times with me still not working, but we're getting by. I still have money coming in, because I'm retired military, so I do have other sources of income. And my wife, well, she's going back to work in a couple of days. She has been able to work while she's been on the mend. And my daughter's up in college, and we're also taking care of our son. And so, it's been a little frazzling, but I just want to, say thank you to everyone who has been checking up to see how we're doing. It is really, really greatly appreciated. So, but until we can record again, my friends, I just got to say good night and God bless.